Hey everybody, welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast on the Love Thy Nerd podcasting network. I'm Hector Mirai, and it is my pleasure to be back with you for a new season of podcast content. This year, you can also, or this year and the time forward, you can find our podcast also on YouTube at youtube.com/at Faith and Fandom LTN. Today, I am joined by one of the most prolific, I think prolific is an accurate word, one of the most prolific people in Christian entertainment. Like, you're the Rock, just with less tattoos, I assume. In a lot of ways, he's the most electrifying man in podcasting entertainment and Christian content. um Radio Matt. Hi, Matt.
Never before have I been introduced so perfectly and so on point.
Humbly
Uh,
as well.
no, I was just sitting here critiquing your intro, just as your pseudo boss
Yeah.
for the podcast network. So I'm happy to be here. Excited to be back on. I was on your show a long time ago now. It feels like
Oh gosh, it's at least two or
uh,
three years.
yeah, I'm thinking it might have been 3 years ago. So yeah, happy to be back.
So at this point in time, for those of you who haven't actually been introduced to Matt, everybody, Matt, um, give the people a description, kind of a rundown on who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Well, I am most known currently for being the director of content and resources for Love Thy Nerd. So I get to oversee all of the writers, all of the podcasts, all of the uh, radio station team, pretty much anything that has to do with content. I technically am also over the Twitch stream, but Bubba and Matt kind of just do whatever they want over there. But pretty much anything that involves content, that's my department, and it's a huge job, and there's not enough people in leadership helping, and that's why I earned
Are
the
there not
trophy.
enough people in leadership helping, or just not enough people in leadership, or just not enough people helping?
If there's a movie called Multiplicity starring Batman
Yes.
back in the early 2000s, late 90s. If I could just clone myself a few times, this would be the most well-run content farm ever. Yeah, no, there's not enough people, period. But this has been part of my, I don't know, spiritual calling, if that's what you want to call it. But this is where God has led me in many different forms. The content, the media guy. That's the talent that he's given me. I was building websites when I was in uh seventh grade, and that's just something I've always been doing. I taught myself HTML in by eighth grade. Like, I had it down. No classes, no nothing. I just learned it. I went to freaking GeoCities and learned it as much as I could. I programmed a whole Stone Cold Steve Austin fan site back then.
Dun, 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 dun.
Photos, videos, logos made by me, all kinds of stuff. And so that's where God has put me. I do that for Love Thy Nerd. I do that for my home church as well. And I help other people who need that in their personal projects, usually for free, because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Just asking this as somebody who does some similar
Oh yeah, we're very similar.
things, and who does them for organizations and then also does them for their local church. Uh, does the doing it for the local church ever feel like it's hard to do in light of all the stuff you do for LTN and others? Do you ever feel like you're like you're giving the crumbs to the local church? Not that you're just like shortchanging them, but like personally, as a pastor who does the social media content for my church, I feel like my church gets like the scrapings and like like, oh, you know what, here's a me, like, I used to be such a big critic of my church's former social media person,
Mm.
and then when I didn't have a full-time job or part-time job beyond, the church and faith and fandom, I felt like I was kind of killing it. Now that I've got like other responsibilities, I'm like, I got nothing. So how do you do that balance? Because like
Poorly.
I'm throwing out like one scripture meme every 6 weeks. Like here, chew on that until I have more free time.
No, I do it poorly. I basically just dedicate Sundays to preparing for the whole next week worth
Mm.
of church related stuff. I have one little bit on Friday. Well, I'll go and record because we do video announcements. Or I do video announcements. Uh, but beyond that, everything happens on Sunday, and so I'm able to get with scheduling and everything ready to go about 90% of it done Sunday, and then give the other 7 days to LTN.
The other seven?
Other, I'm sorry, six. Yeah,
It's like
other
God's
six. It feels
multiplying
like
your
it. Yeah,
your
you know, it
stuff,
feels
man.
like it. The other 7 days. Sunday works twice. You gotta just stay up all night.
That sounds good in
No,
like theory to
no,
me.
it's awful. It's awful, and I'm uh, on the edge of burnout all the time.
Never mind. Well, because in my mind, like I struggle just with like it's as we're recording this, it's Monday. Um, like I think I put one church graphic out last week, and
Yeah.
and like, but I'm doing like all the signs and slides and stuff prior to that. But I'm like, just the idea of doing it Sunday because if I preach, all I literally can do is like walk in my door, take a nap before go helping with youth or something. So
Oh no,
that
yeah, I understand that. On the Sundays that I'm preaching, that those weeks are much tighter because I'm having to focus on that too. But luckily, those are rare. So normally, yeah, I get there. I wake up at like 5 a.m. and get to the church at 5:30. Church starts at 10. I just crank out all the bulletins, all the design work, all of the slides for the sermon, pre- prep all the easy worship stuff, all that.
well,
About
that
four
could
hours.
honestly be a solid input for just for me some wisdom and like it'll probably be better for me to because like a lot of time if I'm helping with youth, I'm literally just like sitting around. So that might be a
Mm,
good time for me to do some of that. Okay, gaining some wisdom. So when I first met you, you were running uh back row radio.
hmm
Uh and you're also doing a meme page.
hmm
And how has the transition been from doing that to doing all the LTN is now?
So with Back Row Radio, when that was going, we also had uh the Back Row Morning Show, which was like we had transitioned from a weekly podcast to doing 4 day a week morning shows, which were essentially just 4 full hour and a half long podcasts. So that was in and of itself was draining. Um, and we kept doing that into LTN for the first couple of years. But we had that meme page, and it was actually like a group, meme group community. And I loved it at first. And then it got popular, and I hated it because it was all 90% of the stuff I did in that group was just moderation. It was, oh, well, this Christian got offended at this Christian meme, and this Christian got offended at this Christian meme. And so the memes don't break any rules, but if I don't take them out, then these are going to just, these people are going to keep complaining. But if I kick them out for complaining, then it's going to set a bad precedent for the future in the group because I can't just kick out everybody who's complaining. If I do nothing, nobody's going to be happy. And like it was just that on and on and on every day. And it got to the point where I was grateful to close that down. We didn't do it right away. Like when we moved over to LTN and got folded into the to LTN radio instead, we kept it going for a little while, and eventually I just looked at my partner at the time, Mo, and said, "I can't do this. group anymore. Didn't matter how many moderators we brought on or anything. It was just nonstop. Christians are great at complaining
Oh yeah.
and staying in the place that offends them all the time. Like, if you don't like being in the group, just leave. Why are you making me have to put up with your marginal happiness and major disapproval of everything that's happening?
Because
Um,
because most people that willingly put themselves in a group think they are the saving grace of the group.
mhm. I mean, you're not wrong. And so getting out of that was great. I mean, in the LTN community, oh gosh, it's so much better. It's already when you come into the group, you already know that we're not presenting a full on this is a Christian only space, and therefore, we try and just be like, look, there's going to be things you disagree with, things that you love, whatever. If you have disagreements, let's try not to air it out in public, and we'll take it private, do things there. And for the most part, it's working. A lot of that has to do with our amazing community manager, Caffeine, but it it's just it's like the better version. LTN's everything is the better version of what I wanted Back Row to be its whole existence, which was a long time. It was like 7, 8 years. Um,
I meant for anybody creating content, that's a long existence run.
it is. It
Um,
is. It,
and
it had a good run.
yeah,
It had a good
it
run.
did.
It
I
ran
mean,
its course.
and you had a big name, not just for yourself, but you had a large audience.
Hmm.
Um, and I meant by comparison, your audience had more girth than LTN's audience at the time of
It
like,
did,
and
but it wasn't the same amount of quality. Let's put it that way.
no, yeah,
It was
no.
like a look in the quantity over quality kind of thing. LTN's community is engaged, and it always has been. It might have been fewer in numbers, but it was more devoted to the ministry.
And
Whereas,
when you've got people that do marketing, especially for social media, they would have looked just on the sheer metrics of people and said, this is a bigger,
hmm,
organization. But I know that you're, looking at the quality of it.
and yet
Um,
nobody ever offered me sponsorships. Very
right.
few people.
Right.
Uh,
And just to ask this, and if it's too sensitive, you know, I know the editor. But uh and you don't have to go into details and stuff, just to ask this of, because like you said, you had a partner through the vast majority
mhm.
of your run with that. And seasons are seasonal and things have changed. Have you felt, has this been a harder go, like within that season of change, of changing partners through these things and not having that consistent backup from that you previously had?
um, I wouldn't say so much harder because it's once that partnership kind of ended, it just everything changed, and so it became kind of a different animal. We tried to keep it going, and that's when it was difficult. But once we decided, no, we don't need to try and replicate what we had done before. Let's just do something else. Then it was great. It's like I said, Mo and I had done that weekly slog of recording one of those episodes, which I'm very proud of. I think the majority of that show's run was phenomenal, but it was a trudge. Like it was a lot of work for I'll say the bulk of 5 years straight, very little breaks. And so when she had some personal things in her life that just it required stepping away. Like it just became the time, and it was a bit of abrupt, and uh, but it was fine. Like we don't have any bad blood or anything. Just life was going different directions at that point. And so when she stepped down, like the 2 weeks before that, before I even knew it was happening, I had said to my wife, one day Mo's going to move back to Tennessee or something, and you're going to have to take her place. And she's like, okay, thinking that's 2, 3, 4 years away. And so then it happened. They're like, hey, remember when you promised?
Ta-da.
So we tried a thing, and we probably could have done it, but I realized suddenly because we had taken a bit of a break to gear up for the relaunch with my wife being my co-host. And I realized during that break just how good that break was and how much work it is to put together a daily show. And so we came back all water pistol charging into heaven, kind of ready to go. And then after a few weeks, I'm just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. We dropped down from the daily hour and a half to a daily half hour. And then we dropped down to a weekly hour. And then we dropped down to a bi-weekly. Like, no, let's just stop it. So we transitioned out of that, went a whole different direction, got a normal podcast here on the network and talking about nostalgia and things that we love. And it's not a whole bear of content production and um, what's the gathering all the information and stuff. We're doing news is what we're doing, nerdy news. And that's just, it's so much. There's so much work having to go into that.
I mean, I even just trying to gather my little bit of news thing for I do on Friday is
Right.
just
Yeah.
like, I'll spend a good chunk of Thursday just like,
It's no easy task. Yeah. It's because there's a lot of it, and you have to balance what's worthy of talking about. If you can get a good amount of content out of talking about it, especially
yeah,
like you do it pretty much on your own. Like I had someone to bounce it off of, and it was still difficult.
yeah. And that's one of the things I've struck like one of the reasons I was thinking of you through that transition was Faith and Fandom started uh as for a large part of it as a two-person front of me on the writing end, and I had a dude who always traveled with me doing art,
Mm,
who was a very talented graphic artist, visual artist, and always had at every con, I'd be talking to people, he'd be painting something gorgeous, he'd be selling prints and stuff and doing sketches and like I want to say at least for 5 years, 6 years of that of Faith and Fandom.
wow.
Like so maybe 2014 to 2020, yeah, somewhere in there, maybe 2019.
Okay. About the time when I
Yeah,
started being aware of you.
yeah. And like I still feel like like 4 and some change years later, I still feel the some of the loss of, remember when this was this, and
Yeah.
I would kill for that kind of like commitment and companionship. So to have somebody anchored, but I mean having your wife being able to do that with you for at least,
Hmm.
the shows now, that's a pretty big deal. And
It's fun.
you're also no longer a content island. You have a whole uh herd of cats to try and wrangle. Um so as somebody that went from being almost solely responsible for a metric ton of content themselves, how has it been managing um a bunch of other people that at times aren't as focused as you are?
I have had to learn that not everybody is like you and me. That that people aren't just human content farms, that they have lives and things come up and deadlines get missed, and it's especially uh there's especially a more need to be flexible because most of these people are volunteering. In fact, almost all of them are volunteering of their time. They're not getting compensated in any way. And it's been a challenge for me to just let things go and just realize that look, we'll do the best of what we can with what we have when we can. And so this last season of the podcast network, for instance, I really stopped harping on shows if they were going to miss a week. Like if they were going to miss their scheduled week, I didn't gripe at them or anything. I'm just like, look, I understand things happen. It's not a big deal. We'll catch up on your next scheduled day and we'll pick it right back up. And most of the shows, which usually have 8 episodes a season, only had 6. I'm pretty sure over half of them only had 6. I think only 2 shows made it the full 8. And I just had to breathe and be okay with that. And when I decided to be okay with it, it felt a lot better. But I mean, it is like herding cats. And again, just with having to deal with so many people, I think that realization is you have to be flexible. I think the biggest difficulty was taking over the writing side of LTN, the articles and things like that, because there's a team of over 100 people that have written for us and that are open to writing for us, but don't always have the time, and their time will fluctuate wildly from year to year, from month to month. We might not even see them for a couple years, and then suddenly they'll be in the Discord. Hey, I have an idea to write an article. And so with this, it's more just about when you got something, bring it. And that's kind of been the mode that we've had to be in for a while until we can start paying paying writers for articles and putting money behind stuff like that. It's just the way that it has to be. And so coming to that acceptance that it's not going to be uh, how I always want it, but it's still going to be good, and God's still going to move, and God's still going to use this content to build bridges and be the love of Jesus to nerds and nerd culture. That's what's most important. Let all that other worry and struggle go.
So long before LTN had its hand in it, you were running your own radio station.
Hmm.
Why?
I grew up, and I think this is what we talked about a lot last time I was on.
Yeah.
I grew up in a radio family. My dad was he made it all the way up to news anchor on ABC radio. Those guys that you hear at the top of every hour on terrestrial radio stations. My dad was one of those. And this is long before I was born. He decided to leave from there and go run some of his own radio stations. And when I was a kid, I grew up with him running a few radio stations in our hometown. I got to go in and see how it all worked and be a part of this process in the little ways that I could when I was a kid. My grandfather also owned a radio station here in the town that I live in now. I own 2 of them. And so it didn't matter where I went, I was always exposed to radio. It's just been in their blood. Now, my grandfather has been like the owner. My dad's been an owner, been like the lead salesman. I'm not into that kind of stuff. When I started working as an adult at my grandfather's radio station, my dad was working there then too. I was in the content thing. I was writing commercials, voicing things, trying to make funny things that we didn't really do all that often. We didn't have like, didn't inject humor into the commercials. We just made very basic commercials. I'm like, I'm gonna try some stuff out. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Uh, and I made some really funny Wiener Schnitzel commercials, really funny Long John Silver's commercials. Like that was fun. I have a whole little reel of all the stuff that I did. But I started making some bits for the morning show they had there too. It's like some pre-recorded. I think it started out as just like voicemails. I'd be like, "Hey, let's check our voicemails from the weekend," and I would just do all these voices and create all these different characters and goofy skits, and they ran them all, and they were a hit, and I loved it. Um, but I also, while I was there, I did like every job. I did because the stations were going bankrupt. So we had to keep letting people go, and they're like, "Well, you take on that job too, for no extra money." So I became um, I became the bookkeeper. I became the guy that scheduled the commercials to go in. It's called traffic. It's not like cars, but it's like scheduling where all the commercials go in between the songs and the shows. I did everything but sales essentially. And it just got in my blood, man. Like I couldn't get it out. I couldn't shake it. When the radio stations went under, I'm like, I really want to do something like this. I really loved the curating the music, curating the shows. I got to help out with the Saturday night request show and stuff like that. Um, in our state, we had a radio station for a long time out of one big city that just went all over the state that was focused on Christian rock, rap, pop, that kind of stuff. Stuff that you didn't hear on K Love all that much. You heard a little bit of it on Air One before Air One turned into the worship channel. Um, but like it was its own thing and it was beautiful. Like this was the kind of music I wanted, especially back in the early Anne Berlin days and stuff like that. Like that was the style, the early Reliant K days, those kind of stuff. And so that eventually went the way of Air One and K Love too. And so I was really bummed about it. And I'm like, that's the kind of radio station I want. Because nowadays, all that music still exists, and probably there's much more of it in proportion to where it was back in the or late '90s, early 2000s. Much more amazing Christian rock, rap, pop, independent music out there you never heard, but nobody's getting exposed to it whatsoever. Because unless your name's Skillet and Toby Mac, those are the only two you're hearing that break out of that box lately.
All right, time out.
Go ahead.
Just because I need to know this.
Yeah.
Uh, if you were to associate Toby Mac and Skillet separately as American fast food eateries, which American fast food eatery is Toby Mac and which American fast food eatery is Skillet? Please go.
Be like, it kind of hurts to say this. I feel like Toby Mac's is McDonald's. Like it's an old reliable. You know what you're gonna get. It basically sounds all the same these days. Big Mac's a Big Mac anywhere you go. Skillet, on the other hand, gosh, I don't know. That's a really hard question. Skillet. I don't know. Popeyes, maybe? I don't know. I don't know. Changing the game. I'm
Interesting.
thinking I'm
Interesting.
thinking pointy chicken. That's what I'm thinking of. Like a more hardcore Chick-fil-A. That's what I'm thinking in my brain.
I was somewhere in the Sonic to Cookout vibe of
Mm, mm,
brisket.
mm, mm, mm.
But you
Maybe, yeah.
you said that and it's like all I saw was like a drive through and I'm like, all right, what restaurant are they? But
But anyway, um, fast food aside, uh, that was one of the goals I wanted to do. So I wanted to start my own radio station, if that was possible, and play the music that people aren't hearing, as well as those old favorites that we don't hear anymore either from the '90s and 2000s. Uh, and thankfully, there's a company out there that handles all of the music licensing for you. Because if there wasn't, there was no way I was going to try and mess with it. Because music licensing is one of the most mind numbing, hair pulling, like it's worse than trying to submit an app to the Apple store. Like it is just, it's horrible. And so Live 365 presented itself as an option, and it's pretty good. Doesn't have all the bells and whistles I'd love it to have, but enough that I'm excited about it. And so we started that back row. We had with through the podcast we had added a lot of independent Christian artists as breaks. Like we reached out to a lot of independent artists, say, "Hey, can we use your music as station breaks?" Uh, like not station show breaks rather. And yeah, sent us a whole bunch of stuff. So we led with that. Like we led with about 100 artists worth of independent music to start with. And then we realized, oh yeah, you need a lot more than 300 songs to run a radio station. Otherwise, you're hearing the same thing over and over again. Because 24 hours, that's a lot of songs.
yeah.
There's a lot of songs to fill in. So we
You mean you
started
can't
adding
just pick
everything.
20 and put them on repeat?
No. Then we had a local station that like put on a Wow 1999 disc one night and just let that whole thing play. And I'm like, I still don't think that's legal. I know they're all different artists, but it's still the same album. But no, you can't. You can't. It's and despite what you think, all top 40 radio stations are not playing the same 12 songs in rotation. They're not allowed to. It's illegal. There's at least 3 to 4,000 songs on that station. It just doesn't feel like it.
So you have been responsible for a lot of the forward motion of content and content digestibility that I've seen. You've not only brought radio to LTN, you've uh, helped bring podcasting to an organized communal experience. You've brought YouTube into the mix. You've just done a lot of stuff to add layers and depths to what could easily be a shallow concept um, of self promotion and self absorption. And you've done a lot to diversify and give handles to things with this. Um, and just like we mentioned at the top of the show, like there's a YouTube channel for each podcast now, correct?
Hmm.
Uh, and you're adding more and more layers to this. So let me ask you, how much is too much for you to be doing and for us to be doing and for like where's the bandwidth of okay, we have to stop here.
My first year working with LTN, before I even had most of this responsibility, at the LTN Con like award ceremony thing, I was given the award, the 26-hour workday award, because of how much effort I was putting into things. And there were a few things back then. Since then, I am now doing essentially the job of three people.
Yeah.
A long time ago, it was too much. A long time ago. And I'm not doing myself any favors by having new ideas and leaping at them. And it usually happens like during the podcast season breaks. So we have like those two-month breaks a year. And I'm like, hey, while I'm, got some extra free time, I'll start doing this thing that I can't stop once the podcast season starts back up again. And so then I'll just be doing something else. Currently, I have two new things from this year within the last year that are a daily grind for me that I have to do every day, that I can't miss a day. If I'm sick or if I'm traveling, I still have to do it because there's no one else to do it. And I've set myself in motion agreeing to this. We have a daily uh, Bible audio thing, which isn't as bad, but it's like I have to plan these whole things out, build all these playlists on Spotify and YouTube, and then make sure that the main listing, the daily one, is updated so people don't have to keep finding new playlists every day. They can just open this one page and now today's stuff is there while still archiving every day previous for people that miss it. And I do a today in nerd history bit that is both a voiced over video that I have to produce and a full on article with more stuff full of images and nerdy facts and all this history of all this stuff that I have to have ready to go for each morning. Each morning at, I think, 4 a.m. Eastern time, it switches over to the new day. And I did it to myself. No one was asking for these things until I had the idea. And Bubba's like, that's awesome. Can you keep doing that? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say every have to you said in that situation is all self-inflicted.
Right. It's all on me. So I don't know the meaning of the word low bandwidth, apparently, because I just keep piling this stuff onto myself. I am very grateful for the handful of folks who have taken things off of my plate. We have Jacob Jones over helping vet and edit all of the articles for the website. We have Thomas Manning, and we have a bunch of our music hunters that are helping me get all the music ready, new music to add to the radio station, so I don't have to spend time searching through all the new releases and stuff. And Thomas Manning does like the voiceovers for things, so I don't have to always be the voice of LTN when things are coming out. It's nice. And most of the podcasts are fairly self-reliant these days, so there's not as much editing to do. Even shows like yours, the mainly the only editing I have to do is throw over an overlay and export it. It's not really uh, a heck ton of work. So the more people are becoming self-reliant and the more people I can convince to volunteer their time, the better I am. And I have to commit. And you know what? I'm going to commit right here, Hector.
It's going on the audio, folks.
No new projects for at least a year. Just run
Good,
with the ones I have now.
good. Well, let's going back to the Justice League version of Justice League. There's a scene where Batman's taking off his suit, and Wonder Woman says, "You can't do this forever," and he just like painfully chuckles and says, "I can barely do this now." Um, and like I feel like that with my level of things, and I
Hmm.
and I know that you're doing more. And like I firmly like that wasn't just hype. I firmly believe you put more effort, heart, and time into this than, and this isn't shade on anyone else, but just pointing out where light is. You put more time, effort, and work into making LTN something substantial in terms of content than anybody else.
I appreciate that.
And I know I'm not the only one that sees those things, and but I also know this is just something that I wrote down as a statement in my journal through the past week is every yes is a no to something else.
Hmm.
And, that's, I know you don't ever want it to become something where you're choking out vitality because you're adding more.
Yeah.
But
That's exactly why I feel so run ragged right now is because I realized that um I had been cutting out a whole lot of time with my kids, time with my wife to do more and more of this stuff. And so I'm now having to, I can't take away stuff I'm already doing yet until I can find people to step in. So what I'm having to do is push all the stuff that I'm doing to the early morning hours and the late night hours so I can have time with my kids during the day, time with my wife in the evening, and not sacrifice my family on the altar of ministry. Because I love LTN so much. I love this ministry. I love how it started, what it stands for. Like as soon as I interviewed Bubba about Love Thy Nerd on the Back Row Baptist podcast a long, long time ago, it was 2018. They had barely begun. Like it had
yeah,
been
that's
just a few
early
months
days.
into it. And as soon as he told me about it, I, I immediately started concocting a plan in the back of my head. I'm gonna get into LTN somehow. I'm gonna make this that ministry will be my ministry at some point. And it took a couple of years, but I finagled my way into. I tricked them into bringing me on because golly, what a fantastic idea! And we're still working out what all it can be. Every year something else comes up as to what we can do in the nerd culture space. There are so many more nerd culture missionaries and ministries out there now than there were just 5 years ago. Like it's becoming a larger and larger space. Like we see that with the Nerd Culture Ministry Collective. All those mostly streamers and online gamers that have turned their Twitch streams and online churches into big ministry spaces. Like I can't do all that. I'm not going to the conventions. I'm not that's not what I'm built for. But if I can be a doorway through this content that someone else can connect with and allow them to come into our space and into our community to have discussions to then bring them into the Narnia that is Love Thy Nerd, let me be the wardrobe and I'll let all the rest of the gang, Luke and Matt and Bubba, run the whole of Narnia. Let them be all the animals and the fawns and the beavers. That would be great.
Can the graphic to this podcast please be Bubba as Mr. Tumnus. Can we do that? Can't please.
I'll
Uh,
see what I can
just
do.
Fawn with a scarf and a maybe a fedora. Um, no, it's and you, that's the thing because you care and because you want this to be something. Because listen, the one thing that's not mass producible is genuine passion
Hmm.
and calling, and that's what the thing you bring to a lot of what we see in this whole sphere of our content creation is you're going to care about this more than other people are.
Hmm.
And as long as you care more, you're going to produce more. And it's the blessing and the burden of, you know, feeling like this is something I need to create. And I think the best art and the best content comes from I need to make this. Not like I could do this, but like I need to make this. And that's I think that shows up in, you know, not just the things that you personally do, but the things that you have your hand on.
Hmm.
I think that's, oh, this is a Spike Lee joint. You can tell. Like you can tell what's produced by certain people, and your hand on it makes a big difference with it.
Yeah.
Um, so what would let's say 5 years down the road or whatever else, if LTN has an unlimited budget and you have unlimited competent, trustworthy staff, um, what would this look like? LTN content as a whole world, what would that look like for you?
Uh, I mean, I guess the first step would be doing what we do now already with a staff. Like that would be the ideal place to start because we're already doing far too much with far too few people. Um, but I mean, ideally, we have a whole massive team over each section of the content, people running the website, people running the podcast network, people running the radio station, and I get just to be a voice in that space for each of them. Because that's technically what my job is. I'm the director of content and resources. I'm not supposed to be the guy with his hands and everything. You know, I'm not the guy in the sandbox. I'm the guy watching who's playing in the sandbox. But it's hard to get people with that kind of commitment into a volunteer position. And since we're not in a place financially to even really fully pay the staff we have now. A lot of our funding is, you know, raised. We each individual missionaries
Support
here
based and everything.
go
Yeah.
get support based for. So like that's half of the money I make, and even the whole of the money I make is not anywhere near of what people in any of the jobs that we have should be making, for that kind of thing. But we do it because of the ministry and because of how important this space is. Um, so getting people in that space would be the ideal first step. Just more bodies who know what they're doing and who can be compensated for the work that they're doing. Um, but as to where it goes beyond here, like I don't know. Like I think, like I said, I think we're already way beyond where we should be. We have 12 podcasts. We have a network of 12 active podcasts right now. That's insane to me.
I don't know of anybody else doing that level of stuff.
I don't think Christianity Today is pumping out 12 podcasts at the same time, and they do a lot. Like there's just and we got more on the horizon, dude. We got at
You,
least
you
two
you just
more.
surprised people that didn't know Christianity Day was still going, but go ahead.
Well, I remember their Mars Hill documentary, which was fantastic. But just the fact that we're able to do this already, like where we're at now, with a level of quality that I don't think enough people realize we have, because there's not enough eyes on our stuff. I mean, haven't we were able to advertise our stuff a little bit more. if we were able to like push this stuff into the spaces a little bit better, I think that would be fantastic because there's people that don't know what they're missing. Uh, these are not basement made bargain bin backwater podcasts. Like these are significant conversations. These are entertaining programs. Um, and what makes them so special is just that they're not, most of them, some of them are aimed specifically at Christian culture, but most of them are not. Most of them are just aimed at, being good, clean content. Like I always like to bring up the wrestling podcast, which I get to do with John. It's like the least thing that I do, but it's fun. In the
Another I get to
wrestling, right?
another passion
He's
project
the
that.
host. He's the host. I'm just along for the ride. I don't do any of the planning, nothing. It's real nice.
Oh,
But
I'm gonna
go ahead.
just interrupt you just for a second because I get to tell you a story that
Okay.
I haven't put on. I'm gonna put this on my podcast later, but I'm gonna tell you this now because it's a fun interaction. Um, Yesterday, I'm wearing maybe it was Saturday. Saturday, I was wearing my Yeet shirt.
Mm,
I was leaving the convention, going, and I was staying at the host hotel for the show. And I'm the con ended. We're all shuffling out the mass exodus door, like as the con floor concludes. And I'm walking through, and somebody just comes up to me and goes, "Yeet!" And which is great. That does happen wearing that,
hmm
dude. It's Juice from Sons of Anarchy. Juice from Sons of Anarchy comes up and yeets at me and then fist bumps me. And then we walk together and take an elevator ride discussing the current trajectory of storytelling in WWE and how he's sick of Cody Rhodes and has hope because of Roman. And then he's like, "All right, man, peace out." And
That's awesome.
but all right, but go on.
Well, what I was going to say is that in the wrestling podcast space, there are no shortage of wrestling podcasts, but 99% of them are not family friendly. There's a lot of curse words flying, a lot of everything. And there are some people, especially in the Christian space, who enjoy wrestling. And yeah, wrestling isn't always family friendly either, but it is more so than it was in the 90s. Uh,
Until we get to Netflix.
and so, oh, gosh, I'm a little bit dreading it. But but there's not really clean. You can still have all the same amazing, fun conversations without dropping an F bomb every 5 minutes. And so that has been a big draw for our show is that a lot of people come to us just so they can listen to it with their kids in the room or in the car or whatever. And, that's not the only reason to come and listen to our show, but it is something that I don't think people realize exists. A lot of people realize exists. And so we have all these shows that cover all this content, but we do it in a family friendly way, not where it's dumbed down to be, great for children, but to where if you're listening to it and your children walk into the room, you don't have to turn it off. That's one of the downsides, I think, of content all going on um independent, not independent, but off of, I guess, government mandated stations and things like that is that we've we're like little kids who discover that they can cuss if their parents aren't around, and so they do it too much. That's what society is now. It's just like, okay, YouTube and Spotify and anywhere that we can put content that is not government regulated, we're going to drop every F bomb we can. We're going to get as gross as we can. And
Which is spilling over into general culture
mhm,
in the school systems. And
mhm,
and if you work with teenagers at all now, it's a different world than it was 5 years ago, just because they're constantly exposed to unfiltered content.
right.
Like, but
And there's no way to escape it. There's no way to escape it.
we can
Uh,
ban things.
right. Christians are not historically great at
No,
banning things either.
nope, nope.
And so to give that to offer that, I think is important. And for the longest time, the Christian versions of things have been cheesy and terrible, and they still are in most cases. And I think one of the things we're trying to do with our content is to go against that. To It doesn't need to be Jesus and puppies every time we open our mouths. Family friendly does not have to mean that it's made for 5-year-olds. It's it's okay to talk about, important or difficult things without dumbing it down or watering it down. But at the same time, you don't have to be vulgar and you don't have to be gross about it. And uh, there's value in that. And I think if we can get people to see that and finally see that in larger numbers, uh, these podcasts are going to take it off. One of the reasons that we're doing all the independent YouTube channels this year, trying to move over to that, is to not let individual shows drown on our main channel, especially with 12, dude. With 12 podcasts all vying for attention off of one channel, you're going to get a fraction of those people. And even then, if someone who loves wrestling and wants to listen to our show, the Two Words Podcast, and comes and follows our YouTube channel at Love Thy Nerd just for our show, and then gets bombarded by the shows of 11 other podcasts, plus all the other playthroughs and daily things that we put out on the main channel, they're unsubscribing. We're filling up their subscriber feed with 1,000 things they don't want for them to pick out the one thing that they do every 2 weeks. So we're hoping to combat that too with these new individual channels, and we'll see how it goes. But uh, it's a lot. I don't even remember what the original question was. I've just been rambling,
Oh, that was
but
it.
I'm excited about
That
all of
was
it.
that's exactly the question. You nailed it. Um, Now, and just for the sake of putting it out there for the people, you are doing this in conjunction with your other adulty responsibilities, but you do raise support to be able to do this,
Hmm.
and you are not supported enough, correct?
Who is?
Correct. Yes.
None of us are.
And so if you want to help create a better space for content and for things like this and all the other 11 podcasts that are out there and all the other million things Radio Matt pulls off, you can donate to him through Love Thy Nerd,
Hmm.
and help support what he does, because I can say this wholeheartedly as somebody who was a support-based missionary for almost a decade. uh, it's a hard road, relying on stuff, because there's also the people that are prone to put content out aren't also the people that are prone to ask for help.
Hmm. I hate it.
And see, yeah,
It's the
because
worst
that's
part.
that's not the right content. um that's bad programming. And so I'm saying this as your sponsor. uh you can support, if you want to help support faith and fandom, you can support Radio Matt, and that's a great way to do it. Across the board, because what he's doing makes a difference. And on a the Dark Knight level, I believe in Radio Matt. Like, I'll wear the congressional pin, and hopefully he's not going to receive traumatic scarring and go on a murdering spree. But like, I believe in what he does. I believe in what you do, and or what you do. And I genuinely think that the Christian content and Christian nerd world is better because of the effort you put into this. So truly, we'll put the links in there. You're gonna feel nice putting your own links in to do this, but I believe that what you're doing is worth supporting, and so I'm grateful to have this conversation with you and for y'all to get to be a part of this conversation.
I appreciate it, brother.
Any closing thoughts? Because I want to be a respecter-ish of your time. So
It's but for the grace of God that I have been given this position. Um, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I do want to remain humble and I want to remain focused on what is best for growing God's kingdom as opposed to what looks coolest to come out of, you know, my editing bay and editing software and the coolest topic to talk about and things like that. So if you could pray for me that I remain focused on the goal as opposed to the means of getting to it, as opposed to the working myself to death in hopes that one more person likes a video or subscribes to the YouTube channel. Um, that would be great. But also, if you could also pray just for Love Thy Nerd in general, because it's growing in weird ways. Like I said, we've got different things happening every year that we didn't expect, and partnerships we didn't expect, and I don't know. You ask the question 5 years down the line, what if, what if, what if? I have no idea what that what if is going to be, but it's going to be something I don't expect. It's going to be something I can't predict. Um, and as long as I get to be a part of Love Thy Nerd, I want to be a positive part of it.
Mm.
And so that's my hope, that's my prayer, that's my request for prayer is never let it be about Radio Matt
Okay.
and to uplift everybody else.
Well, dude, I know, like, well, obviously, if anybody listen to this, we know that you have stuff going on. So thank you for your time. And thank you for your, being flexible with everything else that you're doing. And you can check out Radio Matt on the Two Words podcast. You can check out his, what's the title of your morning
Nerd
show?
history. It's not
Nerd
a morning
History.
show anymore. It's just a podcast. We
Right,
talk
right,
about
right.
nostalgia. Yeah. Nerd
Yeah.
history.
So the Nerd
It's fun.
History podcast with
Talked
your
about
wife still?
Nicktoons this last week. It was great. Rugrats, Doug, Ren and Stimpy.
Dude,
Ren and Stimpy was
that
awesome.
was such a that snick block was so good off the
Oh,
out the gate.
yeah. It
So
was good.
good.
Good stuff.
But you can see and hear Matt in a few areas already, and you can feel the effects of Matt through everything else that's rumbling through here.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you for taking time to listen or watch this episode of the Faith and Fandom podcast. You can find us along with another almost dozen other content sources there through Love Thy Nerd on the Love Thy Nerd podcasting network. We're also part of the Glue uh network that's on the Roku channel. Is that the right word? Yeah.
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 I guess
Uh,
it's
so
weird.
it's
It's a
it's
content aggregator essentially, but
yeah,
yeah.
that's a word that wasn't coming out of my mouth organically tonight. Um, but you can check us on, on the Glue network on your Roku. And you can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/ at Faith and Fandom LTN, and where you can find an archive of, a lot of other great content that's being created. And where can people find the Love Thy Nerd radio?
Uh, Easiest way to go is just lovethynerd.com/radio. But if you want to download the apps, just go to your app store, Apple, Android, and just search for LTN radio. Look for our nice blue to pink gradient there so you'll know there's another LTN radio out there and it's for NASCAR. Let's talk NASCAR. And we're not
Oh,
that. So
no,
just
we're not.
avoid anything with the checkered flag. Unless you really like NASCAR. I'm not gonna maybe they're good. I don't know. But
There you go.
an LTN radio. That's what we're looking for.
And thank you also checking out, and we hope you have a great night and day, depending on whenever you're partaking this. Bye.